Welcome everybody to the Tuesday Facebook Live. Thank you all for joining me today. My name is Kelley Alexander, and I am the program director at the sanctuary at Sedona. And this week, just to give you a fair warning, I'm going to try to keep this to 15 minutes. I think I've been running a little bit longer than I want to, so I'll try to keep it to 15 minutes. And I also today wanted to talk about something that I think could be helpful. I am wanting these talks to offer some of the skills and practices that we offer at the sanctuary that I think might be just helpful. They're actually helpful for anybody, but especially during this time. And one of the things I feel pretty passionate about, having come from being an attorney in my past, is this sort of idea of being an activist or having a voice and speaking up for certain things, something that I'm really passionate about. However, I don't know that I was always an effective activist. And I know there's a wonderful book out by Andrew Harvey called Sacred Activism. But I love this concept of how can I be having a voice and wanting to be a change agent in the world, being able to make a difference in the world and do it effectively, do it effectively rather than divisively. Unfortunately, in the legal arena, there's still so much of a dynamic of battling, the either or, right, wrong sides. I do know that there's a movement towards more mediation and arbitration. However, it's not the paradigm. So I kind of came out of sort of a battle mentality when wanting to make changes for myself individually and then out in the world. And it was actually through the work I did for my own healing work, and then a lot of the work that we implement here at the sanctuary, that has allowed me to be a real sacred activist in my own life for myself and also for others. And I know right now we're at a really powerful time in our history where people are waking up and the veils have been lifted to a lot of social injustices or government controls or whatever your issue may be. We're seeing it all coming to a head. And it's not just in the last few months. I think even with the Me Too movement, a lot of issues with the Epstein sex abuse scandals. It feels like we've been in a good year to 2 years of sort of social injustices or cultural shadow issues rising to the surface. Certainly even with the virus, crisis that brought to a lot of people's issues up about state control or control over our bodies or having speech rights possibly taken, many things. So it feels like regardless of where you are on the spectrum of issues that you feel passionately about, they're all up right now. They're all up. So how can we be the highest version of ourselves, to be, if we have an interest in doing this, to be participating in this time, to have our voice in this time, to be offering our medicine or our gifts or that which we are best able to offer and provide so that we are participatory during this really momentous time of change. I do believe that what we are doing and thinking and how we are behaving and the acts that we're doing or not doing are going to be having a profound effect on our future, near future, and then going forward. So what I'd like to share with you is I'll always use myself as the teaching story, but for instance, I have a real passion around sexual abuse. I was sexually abused by my stepfather when I was growing up. So this was an issue that deeply impacted me. I left home early and had a lot of eating disorders when I was in my 20s and 30s, as well as a lot of body image issues, intimacy issues that kind of filtered out into relationship issues. It was something that deeply impacted my life. So, as I was going through my own healing, I had a lot of anger and frustration, which is part of the process. And I was really out advocating a lot and really wanting to speak up against um, people, especially women that had been abused. And that certainly was an important part of my process. And yet, I also feel that in doing that, because I hadn't done a lot of my own internal healing work around it, that it actually came out more self-righteous and very angry, which again is a very important part of the healing process, but not very helpful in making changes or implementing changes or even being available or helpful as a guide or person to help others going through that process. So what I did that was really helpful, and it's something that we do at the sanctuary. It's probably, I would say, half of what we do, a big chunk of our program, is we help people really learn about themselves, really understand all of the different parts of our being. We call it a lot of the shadow work. You may be familiar, some of you, with the Jungian shadow work. You might have been in psychotherapy with shadow work. Debbie Ford is a contemporary author and teacher that did a lot of wonderful books and even has a wonderful video called The Shadow Effect out. But the theory, the idea behind shadow work is that along the way in our lives, there are parts of ourselves that we gave away, that were taken from us, that we have shame for, that we shame, blame, try to hide, deny, parts of ourselves that we feel are not okay. Whether, like I said, it's cultural, that's timeless, family, origin, shame, whatever. So there's big parts of our being that we sort of relegate to our blind spot. We no longer are able to see it or identify it or access it. So in a lot of ways, we're very fragmented. They're big parts of ourselves that we are not able to access. So we're not really whole. And a lot of the work that we do when people come is they've so identified with just certain parts of themselves, they no longer feel whole. They no longer feel connected. There's no longer an integration with the mind, the body, the soul, and the spirit in their heart. They may only be identified with certain parts of themselves or aspects of themselves. So really, really important that we are able to go and navigate and discover all these different parts of myself. So to give the example, for instance, with my own sexual abuse issues, I had, so much anger. I felt very victimized. I would actually get angry when I would see other women that would stay in abusive situations or people that were somehow not speaking up for themselves. I could get very activated by people that you would think I would actually feel more connected with. I would be very judgmental by people that didn't speak up against things. And I would spend a lot of energy being very angry at how things were being handled. And the result with that was that I ended up by the end of the day being super exhausted. So if all my day is spent, which it was at one point, with what's wrong, it shouldn't be this way. How dare people do that? And being so angry, by the end of the day, I had such little energy for my own health and well-being, for my own interconnections, and able to connect with other people that I was very ineffective. So I had to go through the process and really start looking at my own anger and my own judgment, my own grief, my own sadness. A lot of my anger was really a coping strategy, so I didn't have to feel just the real grief and loss over a sense of youth or a sense of innocence. And I had to also understand, but not having parents that were there to help and protect. I mean, I had so many different layers that I needed to go deeply and do my own vulnerable, tender work. in order to then go out and actually be a compassionate activist on matters. Or what I've chosen to do, I don't do it out in the world as much collectively, but I do it individually where I'm able to be present and help people, including the men and women that come here that have actually been the perpetrators, the abusers. So, wouldn't have even been able to help those people who, by the way, had been abused and just passed it on, had I not been able to get through my own layers of judgment, my own layers of hate, my own layers of anger, and also even look at the places in myself where I was still abusing myself, and forgiving those parts, the places where I had become my own inner critic, where even though I no longer had the externals, I was still making life choices and choosing people in my life to keep the trauma of my childhood going on. So in so many ways, I think being angry or doing a lot of the outwardly activism before I had done a lot of my inner work ended up doing myself more harm. And like I said, I wasn't really effective going forward. So really recommend as this is my red flag. Whenever I find myself incredibly triggered, both and, the things I'm seeing are horrendous. When we see social injustice or racial injustice or gender injustice, or we see, people suffering in any way, shape, or form. Of course, I hope for people we feel it. But I know for myself a difference between feeling it and really, having that empathy, and when I get activated and when I'm triggered and when I am on fire. That's when I know there's a both and. That yes, what I'm seeing is not right, and I want to help. I want to be of service. I want to help change. And I know that I'm not going to get there if I don't address why am I so angry about this, to the point where I'm seeing red, to the point where I want to actually go out and hurt someone, and I want to, and all of a sudden I am so right, wrong, bad, good. I am not looking for any healing. I'm just wanting justice and punishment. That's when I'm like, wow, this is time for me to go do my inner work. And I'm able to go do the shadow work, and really look at what parts of myself are being triggered that I'm not aware of, that want to come back home. The right, the good, the bad, the light and the dark, my own anger, my own rage, my own judgment, the parts of myself that maybe I'm ashamed of and don't wish I have, but they're part of me. We're human full spectrum beings. We're not just right, wrong, good, bad, dark, light, shades of gray. We are all of it. And in me lives hatred and potential for cruelty. And in me also lives beauty and kindness and wanting to serve. And in me lives pettiness and jealousy and envy. And in me lives absolute a sense of deep wisdom. I'm all of this, but I want access from the shadow, the blind spot, so that I have all of this to access from, and I'm conscious of it. And I can also be forgiving and compassionate about all those pieces of my humanness. So I don't have to act out on them unconsciously or act out on them because I'm triggered, but I can be able to sort of rein in this energy and be judicious and conscious about when I want to have my anger, when I want to be able to make or be a bridge builder. But I now have access to all these different parts of myself in the shadow. So it's really important now as we find ourselves getting really angry. Remember both, and we're not saying what we're seeing isn't effective, but if we really want to be making changes in that, it will absolutely never happen from a place of just absolute fury. Fury is part of the process. We want to do our anger work, do that on a personal level, get it out, get to a place where we do our shadow work, find about what parts of ourself are getting triggered that we might actually be projecting out on people, places, and things, so that we can really come together as a whole empowered person, so that now I can actually clear thinking. I'm no longer acting out of my own wounding. I'm no longer acting out of a need to punish and hurt and harm. I'm no longer working out of my own shame and blame, which never works. But now I'm able to say, okay, what is the best use of my time, my voice, whatever it is that I can do to actually make a difference for healing, so that we can kind of come together, not more divisive and more hate filled, and and more othering and more different camps all over the place, which we're seeing sadly right now, but a place where we can honor our anger, our rage, our sadness, our grievedness, and be able to be drained of just that initial triggering, so then we can all kind of come together from a place and look in a bigger perspective. What are the global problems? What are the historical problems? What do we need to do going forward, so we can come together from a place of mind, heart, coherence, and come for the greatest good. Otherwise we may just be indulging our own sense of anger, and maybe have an outlet for our own wounding that we haven't done our own healing around, and yet not be of service in the long run for what we want to do. And that's exactly what we do at the sanctuary. Rather, when people come shaming and blaming themselves or others for their addictions or addictive behaviors, or for the ways that they've lived their life, they're able to really come to a place of understanding, yeah, it's okay. I've got these different parts of myself. I've been unconscious about them. I hadn't healed them. I hadn't gone through my grieving, my sadness, my anger, my loss. And therefore, yes, I see how I was acting out or projecting out on the world, because it was the only way I knew how to deal with this. And now I've got these new tools and practices where I can work through these issues and release them, and then be somebody who can really step into the world, and be a way shower, a healer, a change agent, someone that can be someone to help bring this kind of fragmented, almost I want to say broken world that we're living in right now, so that we can start bringing the pieces back together. So always want to give you just the resources. So I really recommend a few books. Well, I love all the Debbie Ford books on all of the Jungian shadow. She's written about 4 or 5. She's passed away, but her books are still bestsellers on Amazon. And her DVD called The Shadow Effect is absolutely wonderful. We'll give some context about what happens when we are not fully integrated, and our shadow pieces are activated, and how they get projected out into the world, and we actually end up creating more of what we don't want than creating what we do want. So thank you so much for joining me today, and really wishing all of you just a sense of personal empowerment. Really encourage you all to do your inner trauma work, or if you've had trauma in your past, if you find yourself being really triggered and really activated right now, to be super, super kind with yourself. And yes, of course, if you can make a difference and do something out in the world, wonderful. However, remember, you'll probably even be more effective, able to go and first do the inner healing work. You use this as an opportunity to go and have deeper healing within yourself. Which, as we know, it always has to start here before we can actually be effective out in the world. I don't think anybody reacts well when we're being yelled at or shamed or blamed. We just don't. We build up defenses, and then all of a sudden we've lost the opportunity for the coming together and the bridge building. So anyway, blessings to all of you. And again, really invite you all to come and listen to Dean on Friday at noon. Um, I say this with all seriousness. I've known him for 13 years, and I listen to a lot of speakers, and he is by far my favorite, one of my favorites. His enthusiasm and his energy and his vision continues to inspire me. So I hope you all have a wonderful week, and stay in your heart, stay empowered, and many blessings.